back. Let's do a little football at 4 today. Mike Gill, Hunter Brody, Andrew DiCecco here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. This is where we go, and we got a lot to dive into. Andrew's got his 53-man roster projections posted at InsideTheBirds.com. I'm going to lead off with this one, Andrew. On your 53-man roster projection, do you project that Jason Peters will be on the 53-man roster?
Well, I didn't put JP on the roster, but I do think that he'll ultimately be coming back to the Eagles. And when I really was assessing the offensive experience depth there is a tremendous concern.
So let's start with that. I mean, there's some more reports today. Mike Garafolo of the NFL Network saying that the team and Peters remain in communication about a return to the team. He said his status is he's 38 years old. He's high 40s. He says, I feel great. That would suggest more than just 1 year. So are the Eagles interested in Jason Peters as, hey, we'll bring you back for another year because we're not ready for Andre Dillard? Or is Jason Peters, if they come back, is he here for multiple years? Do you see Jason Peters being the starting left tackle then?
Well, I think that this will probably be the one and only year, probably the final year that the Eagles will see. We'll have Jason Peters on the roster, and they really have to eventually take the training wheels off Andre Dillard and really let him be that guy that they drafted him to be. And I think bringing Jason back for an additional year after this one would be stunning his growth. And I think that they just kind of need to let him take the reins and moving forward.
You know, you look at Jason Peters and what he brings. Obviously, think that he is ready to take over that left tackle role, or would the Eagles be in better shape with Jason Peters?
Well, one thing that I kind of gathered from watching Dillard and covering him throughout the draft last season is he needed to get a lot stronger. He's athletic, he's light, he's not as physical as you like. He doesn't have that nasty, that road grader mentality that you like to look for from the offensive lineman. So you kind of wait to see how he would transition as a rookie. They put him in. He didn't perform too well. Actually, if you remember, he got benched. And, you know, I think it kind of may have messed with him, not messed with his psyche. And it also, in turn, led the Eagles to kind of where he stood. And I think there's some questions surrounding whether or not he's ready to protect Carson Wentz's blind side. So, which is ultimately why I think that JP will be back.
You know, Dillard, obviously. Now, I thought he played okay at left tackle. I would say better than okay. I thought he was pretty good at left tackle. I thought he really struggled at that time on the right side when they asked him to kind of move over there. Did you see it the same way, or do you think that he was just an average left tackle? Because I thought he played pretty good at left tackle, not so good at right tackle.
Well, I thought he flashed. He showed signs of a player that has, you know, the intangibles to be a successful player at that position. But I didn't see enough consistency in his limited opportunities. I agree with you there, though. On the right side, he looked like he struggled. He definitely struggled. But I think that they really need to give him the opportunity to, you know, give him an opportunity to play, because if you keep bringing back Jason Peters and throwing him on the back burner, I mean, eventually, if you're Andre Dillard, where are you going to be from a mental space?
Yeah, I think that's a question that Dillard has had, Andrew, is the fact that a lot of people, I mean, for lack of a better word, kind of thought he was a little soft. I remember we had him on last year. I was getting text messages from people. Oh, man, he doesn't sound that tough. And, I mean, you know, we know people in Philly, sometimes they they bring that up too much. But is that a question for you, his toughness?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that when I was watching the Washington State tape last season, you would see, you know, he struggled a little bit with a lot of the, you know, more aggressive physical pass rushers. And you didn't see that nastiness that you really like to see. In fact, I thought that as the Eagles were trading up, I thought that Cody Ford would have been the guy that they were going to target, but it turned out to be Andre Dillard, which at the time a lot of people thought, myself included, that it was a good value pick, because I thought that he could, you know, gain strength, gain weight, and he had the athletic ability to kind of become that you know, left tackle that could, you know, plug and play eventually. When Jason Peters, who's obviously struggled to stay on the field, I thought that Dillard would be a guy that would be able to step in if asked.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. And obviously, one of the things, you know, that was reported today, it was actually some video last week of Peters from Adam Schefter saying that he's working out to play. He's playing with somebody. I mean, so if he's going to play with someone, should it be the Eagles? I mean, do you say that makes them a better football team?
Yeah, it absolutely makes them a better football team. One, they don't have a ton of experience beyond their starters. Matt Pryor is probably their most experienced lineman, and he brings and the rookies Jack Driscoll and then Prince Tega Wanogu. So I think when you assess the line, adding Peters absolutely makes the team a lot stronger in that area, and then you have Dillard being ready on reserve while he can kind of use this season to kind of really put the pieces together in order to take that next step next season.
Andrew DiCecco is with us here, Football at 4, 97.3 ESPN, as we take a look at this Jason Peters thing. I also want to get into some of the stuff Fletcher Cox has been saying. He just spoke recently here and obviously had some interesting things to say. I thought the one interesting thing the first thing that kind of stood out to me was the way that he kind of told Slay, hey, if you want to win, you're going to come here. And, do you think Slay, adding him with Fletcher, like that position, having that corner in Slay is really I don't know. I don't see it as the finishing piece to that defense, but is it enough of an upgrade that their defense is now better than it was a year ago?
Well, anytime you add an all-pro caliber player like Darius Slay to your team, you're automatically going to be better. You obviously lost a tremendous leader in Malcolm Jenkins, but I think Rodney McLeod's ready to step up and fill that void. I think Darius Slay, he has the ability to shut down an entire side of the field. So when you're bringing in somebody with that capability, and you don't really have, you don't even have to worry about that side of the field. And then it becomes okay. Is Sidney Jones ready to take finally ready to take that step forward, which I believe that he can and that he will. But you turn your attention to the second cornerback spot because you don't even have to worry about Slay.
Yeah, that's now it's interesting. The trade-off of Slay and Jenkins. I mean, you lose Jenkins, you get Slay. Last year you had Jenkins, you didn't have a Slay type of guy. So that's going to be, an interesting trade-off there.
Yeah, definitely. And, the one good piece that the Eagles do have is Avonte Maddox. He has the versatility to kind of move around like Malcolm did. Doesn't have the size that Malcolm has, obviously, being 5'9", but he could certainly move around. He can play outside. He can play inside. He's proven that he can play safety as well. So I think it's it will turn out to be a good trade-off for the Eagles and the Saints, and not bad for the Saints either. They got a good player.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. Let's get into some 53-man roster stuff here. Obviously, one very interesting spot as we are now past all of the draft and the first two waves of free agency. I'm sure there's some moves still to come, but the quarterback spot. Does Nate Sudfeld have a spot on this team? How do they account for what to do with Jalen Hurts? Does he dress on game days as the backup quarterback? I think that's going to be a very interesting dynamic all the way through the season is when the inactives come out, what happens with Sudfeld?
Well, it is very interesting. And on my 53, I had Nate Sudfeld making the team. On Jeff Mosher's 53, he actually had Josh McCown coming back late in the offseason, as he should be fully recovered from hamstring injury in June. But I think when you look at Nate Sudfeld, I think the Eagles invested a lot of time in Nate. They like Nate, and I feel like this is the time. This is what you call yourself a quarterback factory. Okay, well here's a guy you spent 3 years developing. So I think he'll be the number 2. And I actually anticipate the Eagles taking advantage of the 48-man now. It's not a 46 game day roster. It's now a 48-man. And I think that you're going to see all 3 quarterbacks activated with Jalen Hurts making some cameos on offense in some creative roles.
Yeah, and another thing is, too, when you look at, I guess on certain game days, if you have Hurts as the only active quarterback, and then he ends up getting hurt in a game. So that's something else they got to kind of keep on, I guess in the back of their minds too. And without any of the training camp potential or the mini camps, is it going to be a real battle for the backup quarterback job, Andrew? And do they even look at Hurts as the backup quarterback this year? Do they even want him to focus on that?
Well, on a shortened off season, the learning curve is steep enough as it is for a quarterback, offensive lineman, and wide receiver. So I think that this abbreviated off season, it pretty much makes whatever you thought you were going to get out of Hurts, had it been an ideal situation, and makes that all null and void because he's going to be behind the 8 ball, and they're not going to be able to lean on him to be the second quarterback because it's as sharp as you are as a learner, you're learning an NFL offense, an entirely new offense. And I think that Nate Sudfeld just has 3 years in the system, so it's a no-brainer for me. He'd be the 2. Jalen Hurts would be the 3, but you don't take somebody 53 overall to have him be a game day inactive.
That's what a lot of people are, enraged about. I agree with you. If there's a guy 53, they probably end up taking him. I think the running back spot is very interesting here when you look at the 53-man roster of how many guys they keep at that position, because there's been some talk this week about bringing in a veteran guy. Carlos Hyde's name's been brought up. We talked about him yesterday. And then, of course, you got Corey Clement back here. Everybody thinks Miles Sanders, Boston Scott are obviously making the team. So how many guys – and do they bring a veteran in?
Well, I think they keep 4 ultimately. And you could also look at, I think they're definitely going to bring a veteran in because, like we were talking about yesterday, we're one, Sanders hamstring injury or whatever it is, nicks and bruises away from having Boston Scott as the primary runner. That's probably not an ideal role for Boston. So I think that, having a guy like a Carlos Hyde, say, adding him in is, tremendous value at this stage in the offseason. And when you look at that 4 spot, it could very well come down to Corey Clement versus Elijah Holyfield. And Corey Clement has the pass catching ability, but a lot of people forget that he in college he wasn't known for his receiving ability. He only had 29 catches at Wisconsin. Elijah Holyfield also wasn't known for his pass receiving ability, but it's something that you can kind of teach. You can kind of tap into that, and he showed glimpses of being able to do that. Holyfield did last offseason with the Panthers. So, and he's a tougher, more physical runner than Corey Clement. I think that he gives them a different another dynamic that they don't currently have on the roster, and he has intriguing physical tools. So I think that'll be an intriguing battle to watch.
All right, wide receiver. This might be the most interesting one of them all. You have 6, and obviously Alshon is a wild card because most of us think he will be on the PUP list to start, won't be ready. So that leaves maybe one spot for one of those deeper draft picks. You also have Marquise Goodwin. So who are the receivers that you think will be on the roster? And then, of course, when Alshon comes back, that means someone probably has to go.
Yeah, I actually, as you saw, I think that Alshon ultimately begins the season on the PUP list with the list Frank as he's coming back. I think when you look at how the roster could be kind of comprised, I think it's Deshaun Jackson, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Jalen Reagor, Marquise Goodwin, John Hightower, and Greg Ward. Greg Ward's the one that I'm a little lukewarm on. I kind of hesitate to put him on the roster because he doesn't have that outside versatility. He's only a slot receiver. He showed glimpses of being, a player that they can kind of mold and make him a potential piece for the future. But he doesn't have that speed element that, say, a John Hightower or Marquise Goodwin has. So he would probably be the guy that would be the one that goes when Alshon does come back. But another dark horse name. I was having this conversation with someone earlier today, and I never really considered it. But Deontay Burnett has been in the system now for 5 months. He's going to be 23 years old in October. He's bounced around a little bit in his career, but he has been in the system, and he kind of established a fairly quick rapport with Carson Wentz early on. There's some intriguing athleticism that he has. He's got really good body control, and I think when you look at that 6th spot, he could be a guy that's certainly in play.
The one thing I noticed was there's only 2 tight ends, and normally we've seen this organization have a Perkins or a Rodgers. You have Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert making the roster.
Right, and my thinking behind that is, one, don't force a player on just because you want to carry 3. Is Josh Perkins or is Alex Ellis the best players to keep? Or are you just keeping it for the sake of carrying 3? I think what they utilize is now that the practice squads have expanded from 10 to 12, you have those 2 extra spots there that you have the potential to elevate both players to make it a 55-man roster throughout the week. So I think that tight end could be one of those positions that they're able to be flexible with.
Yeah, and last year Perkins, I guess, was the 3rd guy that they kind of brought in there when everybody was kind of going in and out. So 2 tight ends, Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, the 6 wide receivers, 4 running backs, 3 quarterbacks. Now, the offensive line, this one's interesting because we started this conversation off with Peters. You have Dillard, Sayamalu, Kelsey, Brooks, Lane Johnson. They're the 5 starters, we think. Who else do you see in the mix for making this team. I think there's one interesting name on here that I think a lot of people are going to raise their eyebrows at. Who are the reserves in your mind?
I would say that it's going to be Jordan Mailata. Would have to be. He would be definitely, earn consideration, and rightfully so. He spent 3 years developing this guy. I think that now is make or break. He's had some unfortunate injury history over the past couple of seasons. He made tremendous strides last offseason, and you kind of saw the glimpses in the preseason that he has the tools to be, an NFL player. Now it's make or break. If they don't feel comfortable putting him out there, put it against, when in live bullets, so to speak, in the regular season, then you got to move on from him. But if you don't have a ton of depth there, so you have Matt Pryor. He's going to definitely be on the team, I believe. Then you have Jordan Mailata, Jack Driscoll, he was a right tackle at Auburn, but I think will be more of a guard center for an NFL career. And Nate Herbig. Nate Herbig's a guy that he was last year's feel-good story. Can play center guard, and they seem to really like him. And he seems to have tools that are worth developing as he goes on.
You mentioned Matt Pryor, and I think that's such an interesting name because last year he had to step in, and I thought he did a pretty decent job for the circumstances. Do you think that that's something he can build on? And if need be, could he possibly slide into a Vitae situation where he's that guy that they go to if somebody goes down?
It's funny you mentioned that, Hunter, because that's exactly what I wrote in my explanation, my analysis for why I kept him. I think he has the skill set to be that Vitae, so to speak, that swing tackle. He played tackle at TCU. We saw him play guard, and he has a lot of versatility. And he showed glimpses of, he showed signs of improvement that, he pretty much spent his rookie season. That was essentially a red shirt for him, but he showed improvement. And you kind of got to see the things he's been working on when he was thrust in the lineup and really had to play.
Yeah, now the one name that I brought up that was kind of an eye-opener was Mailata because a lot of people almost even forgot about the guy. And now that they've added Driscoll, Prince Tengo Wanangu, and they have Pryor, as you guys mentioned, can maybe be a swing player, that maybe Jordan has kind of lost that opportunity to be that, where do you see him now? Is he a left tackle? Is he a swing tackle? If he's a one-dimensional tackle, does he lose that opportunity? You had mentioned the guy yesterday as a dark horse to make the team as well. So that's why I was a little plus he's coming off of an injury, and now there's no mini camps and possibly no training camps. That's why I feel that Mailata was an interesting name there because he might be the guy that's lost some edge.
Yeah, that was one of the positions that I kind of struggled to find a place for him, but he has this tantalizing athleticism, and they spent so much time working with him that it was just such a good find by the front office, and I think that you got to see him kind of hold his own. I believe it was in the preseason game against Jacksonville last year. He really did a nice job, and you kind of, if you're the Eagles, you kind of want to see how that pans out. If you can find a role for him, if he can be that left tackle. I don't believe that he can be a swing tackle. I think he's a little bit. I don't necessarily know that. I think it was enough. It was challenging enough for him to learn one position versus multiple ones. But that will be. He will be one of the players on the bubble.
I want to go back to running back real quick. And second on the list, at least right now, too, is Boston Scott. Now, there's rumors about Carlos Hyde and all of that, but Boston Scott, he came in and he shocked everyone. And when I look at these players who come in and they shock people, and Greg Ward's one of them, and Boston Scott, now that there's film on them, it definitely changes how shocking they could be out there on the field. What are we going to expect from Boston Scott's role this upcoming year?
Absolutely, and you kind of saw that happen with Corey Clement in his second season. Before the injuries played a factor in not being on the field. But I think with Boston Scott, a lot of people asked me this when he showed his flashes last season. They said, is he legit or is he a flash in the pan? And based on what I saw from him, his vision, his elusiveness in the open field, his ability to catch the football and really pound it between the tackles for being a guy who's 5'6". I think he's legitimate. I think that the Eagles have something there in him. I think he has a skill set worth you don't want to get rid of somebody like that because he can do so many different things for you, and he's such a diverse player and a unique player, and he can also play punt returner and kick returner in a pinch as well.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was just going to say, which guy on the team has a shot because of special teams? We always say this guy, like, Mac Hollins, oh, he was a great special teams player. That's why he made it over Greg Ward. Howie himself has said it. Mac did more things, though Greg wasn't as versatile. Is that guy on the offensive side of the ball where he makes the team because of his special teams prowess?
Boston Scott, like you said, he'd be the front runner if I'm looking at it. Greg Ward's also returned punts before. He looks fairly comfortable in that role. Doesn't have that game-breaking speed or that elusiveness you like from the position, but he's sure-handed. He's safe. I think he's an option there. And then another guy that I mentioned, I believe yesterday, Tremont Smith. He was signed to a futures deal in January. He was spent a little bit of time on the practice squad. He was on the Chiefs, I believe, and he made the all-rookie team as a kick returner. And so he's got an interesting skill set. He's still, I believe, he's 23 years old. They even tried him at running back last summer because he is so athletic. He's been in the system a while. He could be that sixth corner if he really lights it up, and if he really brings that skill set to the table that it's kind of hard to part with.
All right, Andrew DiCecco here on the Sports Bash. Football at 4, continuing the NFL tomorrow. We will look at the defensive side of the ball at his 53-man roster. If you want to check it out, InsideTheBirds.com. We'll look over the defense on his they always say it's the too early roster projections, but the NFL, nothing's early, man. We love talking football, and that's why we have Football at 4. Andrew DiCecco, you can check out his stuff at InsideTheBirds.com and 97.3 ESPN.com. Thanks, Andrew.
No problem, guys. Take care.
Yep, and we'll be hearing from Andrew. We'll do his defensive tomorrow.